At stake today, nothing less than the very future of Ukraine and America's standing in the world. Because the meetings with European leaders happening at the White House right now as we come on the air stand to potentially reshape the global order for better, or depending on how things go, for worse. At the moment, there is a multilateral meeting underway in the East Room with a number of European leaders in attendance. They are essentially there as backup for Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, following that travesty of an embarrassment, the ambush on Donald Trump's part back in February of President Zelensky earlier this year. Earlier today, though, Donald Trump and President Zelensky appeared together in the Oval Office. Trump largely behaved himself. That counts as news. He did, though, either wittingly or unwittingly make some news. It had to do with the necessity for a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Listen to what Trump had to say on the topic throughout last week and how something seemingly changed on that topic this afternoon.
It's going to be a good meeting, and we'll go a step further. We'll get it done. I'd like to see a ceasefire very, very quickly. I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires.
It's not just one country that wants a ceasefire. It's Vladimir Putin's Russia. So all of a sudden, a ceasefire? I don't do ceasefires. We don't need those. Then about an hour ago, Donald Trump shared this news on a key piece of any negotiations: security guarantees for Ukraine.
The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out, and I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure.
Of course, everybody at the White House today, vast majority of Americans, vast majority of Ukrainians want peace for Ukraine. The real rub, though, at least for the U.S., is how we get there. In one possible scenario, America stands proudly with her allies, working in coordination with like-minded democratic nations to apply pressure on Russia, the aggressor, the instigator of the war in Ukraine, lest anyone involved forget that. In another, the U.S. moves toward Russia and more fully embraces the aggressor and the instigator, advocating for Russia's desired position, Russia's desired concessions from Ukraine, against the wishes of some of our allies who came to our aid, not for nothing, in the aftermath of September 11th as our NATO allies, without question. It's worth noting that ahead of today's meetings, after Donald Trump met with Putin on Friday, Russia was seemingly militarily, at least, emboldened, launching a deadly assault on Ukrainian cities near the borders, including Kharkiv. Ukrainian officials say 10 people died in those attacks. This live and ongoing and still deadly for the Ukrainians, at least, geopolitical fork in the road is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, MSNBC International Affairs Analyst, Ambassador Michael McFaul is back with us. Also back with us, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling's here. And rounding out our group, former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill is here. Ambassador McFaul, I'll start with you. Just on what we've laid out, where are your thoughts, where are your hopes, and where are your fears?
Well, I think last Friday, that Alaska summit was one of the most disastrous summits that I can think of. Did no good in terms of advancing America's interests or the interests of our allies or Ukraine. And we treated this horrible dictator who terrorizes Ukrainians every single night, as you just showed, by killing them through these attacks on civilians. We treated him like he was some special friend of the United States. Today's been a correction to that. There was a good meeting so far, at least the optics. We don't know the substance yet. It's too early to tell. But President Zelensky came. That was smart, whoever's idea that was. And then adding the Europeans, that was a brilliant move. Whosever idea that was, if that was somebody on Trump's team, I don't know who it was, but it was brilliant because it set the context into something bigger than just about Trump versus Zelensky. And that just, for Trump, that just reminds him of 2016 and impeachment. The conversation they just had with the cameras on just a few minutes ago put it in a much wider context. And secondly, began to correct the framing that Putin had trapped the president into on Friday. This notion that we can't have a ceasefire until we have a full agreement. Where in the diplomatic books does it say that? I've been a diplomat and I've studied diplomacy, all hundreds of years of American diplomacy. I studied for my last book. There's no rule book that says that. That was a Putin line, just as you were discussing. I'm glad, especially the chancellor from Germany said we can revisit that. And then secondly, talking seriously about security guarantees that might include European soldiers in Ukraine. That is progress. I would like it to be a NATO security guarantee rather than a NATO light security guarantee. But if you have to settle for something, that's much better than no security guarantee at all. I saw that was progress. The hard part, of course, comes when we get to the issues of territorial land swaps or where the lines will be. But this was a little bit of progress today.
Let me play Donald Trump on that topic of exchanging territory.
We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them, and negotiating positions. President Putin.
What does that mean, Ambassador McFaul? Can you translate that for us?
Yes. Well, to the extent I understand President Trump. But when he's talking about exchanges of territory, let's just be crystal clear. He's talking about exchanging Ukraine territory for Ukrainian territory. He's not talking about Russian territory. He's not talking about Russia leaving, maybe these little pieces up in Sumy, little pieces they might leave. But the big swaps are Ukraine for Ukraine. Moreover, to remind everybody, from Friday, Putin is demanding that Ukraine leave part of Donbass that Ukrainian soldiers currently control. That is his negotiating position right now. And the idea that we would help to mediate that is completely absurd. And so I hope that that will be one of the ridiculous maximalist points of Putin that might be retired after today's meeting, but it wasn't retired in Alaska. It was alive and well on Friday.
And I went in and looked at some maps and tried to remind myself of what the Donbass region is, why it's so bitterly fought over, how much of it Russia controls, how much of it Ukraine controls. Can you just talk me through what is Ukraine's position on any and all of Ukraine's territory?
Well, Ukraine's official position, President Zelensky's official position, of course, is to restore their territorial integrity to their 1991 borders, which includes Donbass, which includes Crimea. All that red you're showing, that should go back to Ukraine. That's their official position. When I talk informally with people in Ukraine, including those close to the president, I think they're ready to concede some control of their territory. They're not going to give it over, but they might agree to this formula, that we will only try to reunite our country through peaceful means as long as we get real security guarantees from the West, from NATO, from our European allies, and from the United States. And that's a formula that I think is the substantive piece that they should be talking about today. And in my view, the talk about land pieces, that should be between Putin and Zelensky, mediated by us, but that's not our conversation. But then the security guarantee part should be between Ukraine and NATO allies, including us, without Putin at the table. The idea that Putin gets to decide what the security guarantees are, I think that would be a big, big strategic mistake. Keep those conversations separate.